does not stop during pandemic.
Girls deserve to be in school every day of the month.
Abolish bad practices and live with dignity.
Be positive for period.
Menstruation talk, dignity first.
Menstruation is natural process, not a sin.
Period is my pride.
Period. Ladies' problem? No. Ladies' pride.
Live with dignity without danger.
Let's celebrate Dignified Menstruation Day!
Dignity Without Danger is a British Academy Global Challenge Research funded project which is a collaboration between Liverpool John Moores University, Tribhuvan University and SOAS with 6 NGO partners in Nepal. The aim of the research is to explore menstrual stigma and taboos with the aim of generating creative outputs to help break the silence and reduce discrimination faced by people who menstruate. The dominant narrative in Nepal is the image of women and girls being confined to cowsheds, but this extreme practice only takes place in certain parts of Nepal. A team of academics recruited researchers to go to western and eastern Nepal and visit all 7 provinces to interview people from a diverse range of ethnic groups, ages, castes and genders.
Menstrual blood is often seen as being impure, and this belief is at the heart of the practices that exclude people who menstruate from spaces and activities, from sleeping in the same room or bed to entering the kitchen or touching plants and people to visiting religious sites and participating in religious ceremonies.
These nuances of menstrual practices vary across Nepal. They change over time from place to place and even from house to house. They are not only found within one religion, which is a common misconception. Local religious, traditional and spiritual leaders play an important role in maintaining and reinforcing traditions.
Together we have identified that a multifaceted approach is needed to encourage sustainable change. Our partners have been producing radio programs to ensure inclusivity and a wide reach. Our interviews with menstrual activists discussing the different approaches will be released next year.
We are also working with a dynamic, creative network producing engaging content. Interactive workshops creating zines, artwork and murals with Kalo 101, collecting real-life narratives with Jay from Stories of Nepal, clay workshops that break down taboos with Trisha Ong, Sophie Malafant's creative resources for changing the perception of menstruation, and films shot by women in their communities with Sarah Bauman. This new advocacy and educational material will be combined with existing resources into a menstruation education toolkit. Please do contact us if you have any material to include. We believe it is imperative that governments, NGOs, organisations, activists and academics collaborate to bring dignified menstruation to all. We look forward to working together. To find out more, please find and follow us on social media.
Fondazione Un Raggio di Luce is an Italian organization, and its name in English is A Ray of Light Foundation. This organization has been working in Nepal since 2005 and in the district of Jumla since 2008. In 2012, we started a project called Women's Empowerment and Livelihoods Improvement. This is a multi-sector intervention through which we implemented activities in the food security sector and in the income generating sector, alongside with a number of activities to raise women's self-confidence, to improve their skills and competence and promote leadership among women. Among these various activities, we also sensitize the population, women and men and local authorities on the practices and the discriminations that were prejudicial to women's lives and women's rights. Among these activities, we sensitized women and men on the practice of Puberty, the isolation of women in huts, and the various discriminations and restrictions that women had to observe during the menstruation. We successfully managed to eliminate this practice in about 30 settlements and 600 households. And we believe that we were successful because we operated in these communities continuously for years, and we implemented a number of activities through this multi-sector project. This year we started a project in partnership with a local municipality in Jumla, Tila. And through this project we aim to eliminate Puberty in the whole area.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Namaste. This is Marina Ranjit. I'm the moderator for this panel, and it's so glad to hear all the passionate speakers and the panelists and the very well moderation by Milya Adhikari just before. Now we are running this panel on menstrual dignity throughout our life cycle, and as you have seen just now, we have a very prominent speaker and also a panelist who are lined up here to discuss more about menstrual dignity throughout the life cycle. As we have talked about dignity and its psychological impact, and in our previous session, this session we'll be talking more on the how we are going to incorporate that in our life cycle. So I'm equally excited as you to learn more about it. So without wasting time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Inge Pach, who is an individual whom I have known for many years and a dear friend, and who has been working on the systemic change towards the change and the transformation in the society in the various fields of social development. She's from Hamburg, Austria, and I would like to welcome her to give her keynote speech. Welcome, Inge.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you to everyone. It's really, really nice to be here, and a very warm morning and evening and afternoon from wherever you're from. I'm really excited to be here on this panel and honored to be the keynote speaker for this topic. I want to thank Radha personally for introducing me into this topic with many, many discussions over the last years. The Radha Paudel Foundation for all their grateful work. Also the government of Nepal, who has joined in this whole activity, and I'm really happy that this gets more and more recognition throughout time. Also, I want to thank to the Afroasiatisches Institut in Salzburg, who have separated from me, done some activities on December 8, which I find really great that also Austria is getting started here. And of course, all my joint panelists. I personally had, my experience was when I got my menstruation first, my mother used to be in Africa, and she would tell me how in Africa they would really celebrate a 3-day feast when girls first got their menstruation. That was something really inspiring me. And when I got my first menstruation, I found it so cold, it's so, nothing is happening in Austria. And I remember that I was really sad when I was 13, 14 at this time, feeling that there is nothing happening. It just like happens very technically, you get your tampons and that's it. But then later I was in Nepal and I met Radha and I realized like, okay, my my own story is probably not a very bad one in comparison to what many women from this planet have to suffer when they actually get their menstruation first. And this really started to open my eyes that this is a very central topic. So we'd want to talk about menstruation across life cycles. So for me, I'm very much into complexity theory, and therefore, for me, I understand life is happening in cycles all over the place. No, so we have the small cycle, and the small cycle is not what I'm talking about because probably that's not what I'm expert in. Like my expert is social change. Is how does societies change, and how can we bring about innovation? How can we understand to see patterns and systems in society? So I don't want to spend much time in talking about the small cycle. There are others out there who are way more qualified. Then there is the next cycle, which is part of this panel, which I see from a systemic perspective, saying, okay, we start off with childhood, we go to puberty, we have pregnancy. This is a very special time for us women. All the birth, breastfeeding, and everything which happens, and eventually we go into menopause, and our life cycle, our personal life cycle is over. I think I have found like 2 ways how these life cycles are at the moment. I have seen 2 ways on how this is practiced. No? So we have the reality number 1, which I saw actually in Nepal, where this has become a discrimination, where maybe out from some patriarchal power structures, people really have been discriminated from outside. And as we have heard before, also feeling this fight, I would call it the fight from inside, fighting against what is actually a natural process. And of course, this has massive psychological and social impacts. But then I have also seen how there are other countries, like in Austria, where we actually neglect life. We neglect this play of life and how there is a flow, and we go with life because nothing else, menstruation is nothing else than life, pure life, which we have in us. So, and then there is also, we don't feel the limits of our body anymore. I could see many women over here just used to every month taking a painkiller just in order to be able to go out and work. So I feel that also this is really, rather did he open my eyes than saying, okay, also here is a discrimination in how we deal with our body, with the flow of life. So the question I would like to send off for this panel is saying, well, what is the bigger circle which we probably are, which is so long in its duration because it lasts maybe for centuries, which so that we are not really able to see it. And like I made up a hypothesis saying, okay, probably we start off from cultures where there is the moon cycle, where we're really still within nature a lot. So indigenous people who have a full access to their body and all the energy which is happening this time. We go through probably, and it's just a hypothesis, no, do we go through a phase where there comes some patriarchal power structures? And I have had the honor of working or translating for a Mohawk Indian who comes from a matriarchal society, which really opened my eyes how this perspective change can actually change the whole way on how we deal with women, the feminine, the care work, childbearing, and all these aspects. So has it maybe happened that we then enter a phase where patriarchal power structure brings us into some kind of stigmata, neglecting? And how can we turn this into celebrating? So the neglecting is what I already described with Europe. And then how, for me, the question is, how can we turn this into celebration of life again? And maybe what comes next? Because when I learned one thing from complexity science, that no status is ever the final status. It's always just the next step, the next way. We are talking about a culture change. I just heard before saying, it's like saying, what is the next culture change? But even that will not be the final one. And where does the journey go in the long run? So these are the questions which bother me or which interested to me. And therefore, I'm really, really happy to be part of this panel and explore this together with all of you. I mean, my feeling is telling me that we go somewhere, this next level will be something where we say all this female, this feminist contribution, all the life-bearing, all the care work, and that's more my background. I'm very much into economics and wondering like how is economic blind, for example, on all the idea from child rearing up to all the other contributions which we women often do. It can also be men, but which is the feminine part of work, the care work called in the economic discourse. I think that this will be something where life is much more celebrated again. So where we recognize the moment where a girl gets her first menstruation as a really critical, as a change in her life, and celebrate this, probably maybe the way the Africans, the people in Zambia did it when my mother was there, or maybe in a very different way, but where we don't neglect it neither. And where we have empowering rituals of whichever form at any stage in time. But also where the whole society, economy in which the menstruators are embedded has found a way how this can happen in a life-embracing manner. So also I'm talking about, for example, dignified products which are following a cradle-to-cradle approach, so that also life outside so the life which is not the menstruator is having a positive impact, so is not harmed by, let's say, plastic waste coming from sanitary products. Where there is an infrastructure which allows for menstruators to do so, where there is a working culture which allows saying, well, if you have really probably facing some trouble because of your menstruation, it is okay if you say you take a day off, which, for example, over here in Austria is something. Where there are institutions and habits simply embracing the flow of life, I would say. So therefore, I'm very happy to hear all the experts of you who have been working in the very different time stages as well as in the very different countries. I'm so happy to learn more about how do you practically work on the topics of menopause or with girls in remote areas of Nepal during special times or just in their ordinary life. So thanks a lot for giving me the possibility to give this brief impulse, and I'm really looking forward to the session.
Thank you, Inge. Thank you for putting that perspective in, that this is a cycle of life, flow of life, and then it's just that if we change our perspective, things can be much understood in a better way. So with that takeaway, maybe we will move on to our panelist, and let me first quickly introduce our panelist, who is a very prominent figure in the field itself, but just to all the people who are enthusiastic to know about, like me, Helen Kemp. Helen is from, she is the founder and the trustee of Menopause Cafe, which I found was very intriguing thing that is talking about menopause. And we have Jaideep Mandal from India, who is a pioneer in and the venture, social venture, Innovative, which produce eco-friendly sanitary products. And welcome, Jaideep. And we have Mr. Rajan Raj Pandey, who is a very prominent figure and one of the flag bearer who introduced dignified menstruation to the government of Nepal during his former joint secretary, and he has been a very well-known figure in the water and sanitation front in Nepal and across this continent. And we have Pasang Tamangji, who is also an water and sanitation expert, I would say, have been working in this field with her Manavta project, and as well as she has been involved in various neonatal and maternal projects through Save the Children. And I would like to welcome all the prominent panelists, and I would also like to take an excuse. This will be a learning opportunity for me as well to learn from all of you. And Inge, I will also be bringing you in the discussion as in when required. So let me first start with Pasangji first. So Pasangji, you have been working in Nepal and in the wash sectors and the maternal health sectors, and also growing up, I assume, in Nepal. To talk about this dignity, menstrual dignity in the life cycle, let's start with the puberty. What was your experience when you started your menstruation in Nepal, and what is your experience while while you are working in Nepal, what do you see is the major challenges of menstrual dignity in the puberty phase in Nepal?
Thank you, Medina ji, and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone who's around the world according to the time zone. I feel honored to be part of this conference because, not because I'm an expert in the area, because I have my own personal experiences that I have come across in my life during the menstruation things and stuff. So I would say that I would like to start with a little bit background of myself. Like, I'm from the northern part of Nepal, from a Tamil community where but I was brought up in a Kathmandu after the age of 5 years of old. So I don't really have a much experience about how it was in the rural areas during the time of the puberty. But since I was brought up in the capital city of Kathmandu, people might think that there were no any menstrual restrictions or anything since it's a city area. But I would like to bring in an insight that the first time I heard about menstruation was when I was in my class 7, as one of my friend was absent at the school, who lives near our school. So we thought maybe like she's absent because she felt unwell or something. So I think we should just visit her, because at that time there weren't we didn't have a privilege to have mobile access or internet access all the time. So we just visited her. But then when we visited her, we realized that she was kept in one of her room in the house. And the reason was because she was menstruating for the first time. So she was kept away from, she was told by her elders, said she can't have a look at her fathers or brothers. And she also can't go to the kitchen, or she can't go, basically she was told that she can't go out of that room and she can't take anything that's used within that room in the other area. And when we went there, she was watching a TV in that room. So we were kind of it was kind of because I think it was the age that we did it. She was like, oh, now it feels like I'm the boss of the house, because I can live in a one room and I can order, I can say, Mom, I want to eat this and that, and then she would bring it for me. Whereas in other days, I would have to go and do it myself. Even if I don't cook, I would have to go to the kitchen and take it, and I have to wash my dishes like that. But now I feel like I'm the queen of my house, so I can order around people like that. And it was taken very lightly at that time. But as I learned about things, I realized that there are, it's not just about it was we take it as a lightly, because I think it's because of our mentality, child mentality as well at that period of the time. But and even I had my menstruation when I was in my class 9, and being from a being from a Tamang community, I'm not sure about I can't say about the entire Tamang community in Nepal, but from where I'm from, which is in the northern part of Nepal, there we don't have a menstrual restrictions and things like that in our family and in our community, because we can do anything that we do in normal days when we are not menstruating. So basically we talk about menstruation within families, mothers are teaching us on how to use the sanitary pads when we first menstruate. That was the thing we started talking about menstruation. And with our fathers or brothers, we wouldn't talk about menstruating things, but we would talk with them about if I need extra pocket money per month, I would say, because I need to buy a sanitary pad, so I would need extra money. That was the only time when we talk about menstruations. Other than that, we didn't have a platform where we would share about okay, I'm having this kind of changes or that kind of thing changes. Those kind of things we were not talking about. So I think it was when I heard about my friends' culture that they had restrictions on certain things, it was a huge cultural shock for me, because most of my friends were from Mongolian circles, like Gurung, Sherpas, and none of us had heard about those kind of things. So it was a cultural shock. But then as I worked and traveled around various parts of the Nepal, I saw more about the menstrual restrictions, menstrual stigmatization, how big rooted it is within the community. For example, I would like to share this one experience that I had recently, I would say a year ago, which I faced, and that's the one of the biggest shock ever that has been for me. As a part of my PhD, I went to collect my data in the Karnali region of Nepal, in a region of Nepal, and menstruation wasn't my area. I was collecting data regarding maternal and child health and the quality of care that they received during the period. So the talk that we received was like, I went in one of the health facilities to talk with the auxiliary nurse midwives. So we were casually talking to build a rapport build and to understand the scenario of the health facility there. And the experience that she shared, it was really, really heartbreaking for me myself. I think the tear rolled down my face when she was talking about her story. And what she was like faced was like, she went to ask for a tea in one of the near tea shop near the health facility. And at that period of the time, she was menstruating. So what the shopkeeper did was they gave her a tea in a plastic bag. And because they thought like she's menstruating, so when she uses cups or anything, that would make their shop impure. And then other people won't come to their shop because they are making it normalizing, things like that. And that was a huge cultural shock. What she did was like, she said like, because she was a health person herself, she understands that it's a natural phenomenon. And what she did was like, she just threw the tea to the shopkeeper's face and said that because you discriminated me, I'm never going to come to your shop from now onwards. And she avoided that. So that's a huge cultural shock for me.
Yeah, so thank you, Pasang, for sharing your experience. And I know because that is lots of cultural change and the perspective change that Inge talked about. Because it's even though we do have even in the video that we saw, puberty is something that is being practiced in most Western and some northern part of the country. There is a good practice within our country which needs to be brought in, like as you mentioned, from the community, your community. We don't have a differentiation. Even in our community, we don't have much differentiation when you are menstruating and not. Whereas we do celebrate when the menstruation happened, and there is a special celebration that happens during the first menstruation. It's like, and that is marked with the various kind of calling your relatives and having a kind of a feast going on. So this is, again, that is something, good things need to be brought up. The one thing that we need to know is while we are going through this cycle of changes and all these hormonal changes that is happening, as well as there is lots of infrastructure that needed to be fulfilled, that the need of the menstruator. So that's where, like, as a young kid, as a child, when you start bleeding, how does it impact, and what is the need of the basic need of the infrastructure that you get in? So Rajan sir, I would like to come to you as one of the part of the policy maker, and having been worked in the water and sanitation sector in Nepal and different part of the other world as well. How do you see that dignity, menstrual dignity, is incorporated in water and sanitation sector, especially now talking about the young children, young girls? So how is it being incorporated? Is it being discussed? Is it actually part dignity being talked about when we talked about building an infrastructure for a school or public facility or a village?
Thank you very much. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks for welcoming me here in this program. First of all, I would like to respond to your first question about dignity. So far, we have not been able to address that in our case, be it in the government or outside the government. So it is not the case right now, but slowly it's picking up. Dignified menstruation is being talked about by many. So I think in due course of time, some progress will be achieved. Next, you talked about the infrastructure, whether it is dignity friendly. So there are so many lacking things in the infrastructure while addressing the dignity of menstruating women and girls. First, it is the distance between the toilet or bathing place from the workplace or the dwellings where they stay. So this makes the menstruating people vulnerable against some social crimes, and even some accidents, natural accidents. And if you talk about the toilets or the bathing spaces, they're not properly lighted. Water availability is another problem because it is thought as least important place where water should be there. Soap, again, there's another problem. The ventilation is not proper and bad smell is there, so people are not encouraged to go inside. And more often in the public places, the walls are very porous, so the dignity is not at all maintained there. Then safety against reptiles, insects and rodents inside the toilet and bathing spaces is another problem. Vector problem is there. Lack of door locks, lack of doors even sometimes. And even if there are doors, the locks are not proper and someone has to hold the door by the hand and squat on the pan. So this is the case. And next big problem is the disposal of waste. We do not have any disposal mechanism in the public places, and more often the sanitary napkins are strayed in the rural settings also. And sometimes we see dogs eating those, dogs and jackals eating those used menstrual pads. And less numbers of toilets are there, and availability of toilet is very less in public places. So this has to be looked into very urgently. And another issue is the distance between male toilet and female toilet. The separation is sometimes just next door. So the little girls, they are a bit afraid of going there, and rather they choose some vacant spaces or some lonely spaces outside, and that is more dangerous to them. And more often there are vulgar writings on the walls of the toilet, and that makes the menstruators discourage them to go there. There are some leaking roofs during rainfall, and it makes the floor slippery, and sometimes it is muddy as well. The height of the cubicle is another problem. The height is not proper because it is the least important place that people build in our country. The internal size of the cubicle itself is very less, so that especially the disabled people are not very much encouraged to go inside because there is no turning space for the wheelchairs, and there are no handles on the wall to hold it and sit down. And there are no cleaning agents as well available in the toilet itself. Those are not child friendly either. And availability of sanitary napkins is almost none in the public toilets. And above this all, the country doesn't have a policy on dignified menstrual hygiene management. Although a draft was prepared 4 years back, but it has not been approved so far. So this international workshop, I think, should focus on that as well as one of its resolution to pressure the government of Nepal to bring the policy as soon as possible. And another thing is the people's psyche about building toilets and bathing facilities. They tend to spend very less on it and make it a very unimportant looking thing. So people also should be a bit aware on this issue about dignity and then spend a bit more to make the toilet more friendly to the menstruators. I think these are the problems that we see nowadays in Nepal and most of the South Asian countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajan, sir, for summarizing and empathizing the issues that menstruator feels in the context of Nepal, like especially in our part of the world where we don't get the required facilities not just in public toilets, but in the schools. So Jagdeep, I would like to come to you, you being innovators and coming up with lots of solutions on providing, because the dignity of the product is also something when it comes to talking about menstrual dignity and all. So how are you working on availability of the products, and give us your view on the product dignity of the product when it comes to this young age girls who are menstruating, right? This young menstruators.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people across the world. So I would like to start with a part whereas on the product side, like whereas now there is a lot of misconceptions there, and then also there are a lot of misinformation which is being promoted by many organizations in this domain, which is very unfortunate, but which is the truth. Which is that, like, so when you talk about products, like as an organization, ACAR believed always talking about three things, which is first of all, bucket of products, secondly, informed choice, and thirdly, freedom of choice. I think all of you will understand, but I'll just take maybe a minute to explain this. So bucket of choice means when you're talking about products, it should be like there are many things which are there, starting from a cloth to a cloth pad to a disposable pad to, let's say, the new thing which is compostable biodegradable pads to tampons and to menstrual cup, and the new product which is then now the also the undergarments, the menstrual undergarments, which is the new product which is coming in the market. Now this is like the we call it as a bucket, and then like when you say bucket, then there are like all the products which is like which can be used for managing the period. And the next thing is that which is the informed choice. Now informed choice meaning, now when you talk about this product, you should also give, or the consumer or the user should also know the right information, unbiased information, scientific information about all these products. And when you say that, when you talk about this product, you should not talk about that like this is good or this is bad. Starting from cloth to going towards, let's say, a menstrual cup, all the products have their merits and demerits, which means, like, let's say, and just to talk about like a couple of examples, like menstrual cup is kind of the best solution available in the market, which I think most of you will agree. But then again, it is used right now only very few percentage across the world, even in developing countries like USA or Europe. And there are reasons behind that. Like, first of all, it is not very good product for the young girls. But it is good for, let's say, beyond the age group of 20, 25, 30 and above. And it is very good for, let's say, people like when you cannot change the product, like whereas the sanitary pads or other ones has to be changed within 6 to 8 hours, and you need to use it for longer hours. So menstrual cup is good. Now coming back to another example, let's say tampons, like maybe while you are going for swimming, or you are a player where you are doing gymnastics, so that tampons is a good product which one can use. You cannot use any other product there. Maybe in the night, I think sanitary pad or maybe a cloth pad could be the best thing which one can use, especially the sanitary pad, I would say, which is more comfortable to be used in the night. So there are like, but then like in terms of tampons, if they say like, so you insert a tampon, if you forget about it, one can die also. Because it can suck like not only the menstrual liquid, but all other liquids which may be there in the vagina. And if you get dried up, then there is a TSS syndrome which can happen, and there are many people who have died. Many women and many menstruators have died because of that. So every product have their merits and demerits. So it doesn't mean that like when you're talking about a solution or a product, you should talk about only one. Very unfortunate part is that, and then I go talk about this bluntly, openly, that nowadays it is happening more. Let's say people who are focusing on a menstrual, this cloth pad and also the menstrual cup. So they say that their solution is the only solution, not disposal pads. All other things are all wrong products, or they should not be used it because it has other challenges. I do not agree with them. And he said, like, when you say that, like, you're denying many people. So you should give that unbiased, right information to them. And then that's come to the last point, which is the freedom of choice. So the choice should be with the users, with the consumers, with the menstruators. that they decide according to their need, according to their financial choice, according to the societal need, they decide that like which product they want to use, which brand they want to use. And on top of that, like I can say the things that one single woman or a menstruator can use different products to manage their single period, which means like, let's say, in those 5 days, if someone is traveling, they can use a menstrual cup. In the night, they can use a sanitary pad. Maybe while swimming, they can use a tampon. It is not necessary that one has to use only one product while they're managing their period. So that's why I think these three things which we have been talking about promoting, but unfortunately, in this menstrual hygiene scenario in India and also other places, so people keep promoting their own products, whichever they work for, and then stop talking about other things. So whereas we try to talk about these things, and which is we feel is very important. And and then we, as a solution, we only make compostable sanitary pads, which is there. But then while we talk about the education and awareness, which have another arm for us, our social ventures, we do not talk about our products or promoting it. But as a solution, this is the buckets and this is the things which are there. We talk about that. I think, I don't know if I've answered.
Thank you, Jaideep, for your insight on the pocket of choice and the freedom of bucket of product and the freedom of choice that you talked about. And we're going to talk more about in the remaining part of the session. And then now I would like to go to Helen. Helen, you have been, even though you have been working on the menopause awareness and this aspect, I would also like to take your view on menstruation as a dignity and a part of human right. Why do you think, and what have been done in the early phase, in the adolescence phase, when it comes to the dignity of those young girls in your part of the world and also your experience?
Well,
Talking
good
about
morning.
young girls.
Good morning, namaste. And heartfelt thanks to the organizers for inviting us to come along to this inspirational workshop today. What I will do is just very briefly introduce what we do and say a little bit about us. We're a charity with our headquarters in Scotland. And since 2017, we've seen our reach expand globally. And we have a presence in Kenya, Denmark, Canada, Ireland, and the United States. And the aim of our charity is simply to create spaces for conversations about menopause. And we do this by facilitating pop-up events where anyone, men, women, young and old, and that's really important to us as well, that they're open to everyone, can come together to talk about menopause-related topics, which will include, obviously, menstruation. And the events are always free and all run by volunteers. Why is the need? I think it's probably best answered by a question. How many of us have heard the word menopause being openly spoken about in public? We heard from the Make Menopause Matter campaigner Diane Danzibrook yesterday. And not only do my own personal experiences mirror Diane's, we hear from women all over the world who were not prepared for menopause in the same way that many girls are simply not prepared for their first menstruation. And it's estimated that up to 75% of women will struggle with some aspect of their menopause. And whilst we hear about hot flushes and night sweats, there's very little about the impact on women's mental health and their emotional well-being. And I'm very much from the Forewarned is Forearm school of thought. And I believe that by empowering men and women to have these conversations about menopause, we can help reduce the shame and stigma that surrounds a natural life event that will affect 50% of the population. And given that women will live a significant proportion of their lives post-menopausally, I feel it's possible to help and ensure those women can thrive during this third phase of our lives. And as a demographic, post-menopausal women have so much to give. We're creative, we have valuable insight, and with the passing years, we often develop an inner drive and a passion to clear the path for those who follow behind us. And awareness is absolutely vital. And that's where the Dignified menstruation movement is so important. because without dignified menstruation, it's highly unlikely we'll have a dignified menopause.
Yeah, thank you, Helen, for the very insightful word that, yeah, of course, menopause is something we haven't talked much about. So now, as we move on, and there were very few points that our previous panelist has brought on about the infrastructures, about the choices, and now coming back to the, again, during the dignity of throughout this life cycle, especially for the young girls. Pasangji, I would like to know, what does the school has a role to play? And in few of the comments, I have been seeing that there is a role of school and the teachers that they have to play during the dignity of menstruation, during the very early phase, especially for the adolescents girls. So what is the practice here in the most of the part of the world, and what do you think needs to be changed to incorporate dignity as a part of this cycle, especially in school? What is done and what should be done?
I would like to start with my school, remembering my school days. During my school days, we used to have a subject called health and population. So in that subject, what we used to study was, we used to study about physiological changes of the adults, like for male and female body parts. So during those classes, most of the time the girls, us, even myself, we spend our times not looking at our teachers because we would feel shy to talk about, and if we had any queries, there wasn't any platform where we could ask about our questions, especially if the health teacher was a male teacher. And also I think during my days, I don't remember having menstrual study, or even dignity word is a far behind, because I don't remember having the menstruation itself within the syllabus. I'm not sure about how it is now, but when I was in school, there wasn't any syllabus mentioned where we would talk about menstruations and things like that. I think that needs to be changed, and it has to be, menstruation or dignified menstruation has to be within the school syllabus from the very early age, because then that's the age where people learned about communities, culture, or even the education part, things like that. So it should be started in the very initial stage. And another role about the school was, like, I think that every school has to have a gender-friendly toilets, I would say dignified friendly toilets, where the women or girls, whoever are menstruating at the period, they can have access to soap, water, or even the lights, or as Rajan sir mentioned earlier, that there are public toilets, not just public toilets, that's the real scenario in schools as well, where the door locks are broken and one has to hold the door handle when they are going for toilets, like that. So those kind of things has to be considered by the school, and those needs to be maintained. And also I think they should also have a provision of putting the minimal, if they can't afford for more, at least they should have a minimal menstrual products accessible to the girl child, so that they don't have to miss the schools, or they don't have to miss the school, as well as they don't have to go to return back to home after a halfway in the school because of the leaking, because they need to go home and change it because they have been leaking. So those kind of environment, we can avoid them by basic things like having a menstrual products available at the school toilets, those kind of things. And also I think there should be a platform where even the teachers, or even the principals, or there should be somewhere where they could talk about it, because I would say even family plays a big role as well. Within our families, we don't talk much about menstrual things, and the thing that I remember talking about menstruation things freely with any boys within the family is, I would say, my husband. That's the only, he's the first person I have talked freely within the boys circle about menstruations and issues that have been arising and things like that. So we should, it's been like, it's a concept, menstruation itself is a concept which has been stigmatized very highly since a long time. And as we all know that changes takes time, but I think it should start within our families where we can talk about it freely like that. And I think it's not just about having a dialogue, but also it's like because women and girls and things, my friends, I have seen my friends following the menstrual restrictions and things like that, because just because their mothers has been doing the same, their sisters has been doing the same, and no questions asked. So I think there should be a platform where we can discuss about our choices and the reasons behind the actions and things like that.
Yeah, so definitely this is about making a change, and of course it is about rights. It's a part of human rights, and if you see the history also, it took lots of dialogues and changes, and it's all the societal. It's not just about small changes that happens, but it's a societal changes that needs to happen, and it needs lots of dialogue. And like if you look the history of human rights, how long it has taken, maybe we can fasten for the dignity of this menstruation. Thank you for that point. And as most of us have been talking about when we talk about menstrual dignity during the puberty phase, we talk about schools and the infrastructures and the schools. And Rajan sir, I will now again come back to you that I know that there are lots of requirements for the infrastructures for schools, especially when it comes to water and sanitation. How do you think, and we are talking about differently able friendly toilets, differently able friendly schools, when will be the time that we will be talking about dignified toilet for the girls? Do you think, where should the starting point be? How can we incorporate that in the policy level? And what could be the, uh, where should that dialogue starts to start having a dignified toilet for the girls in the schools to start with?
Well, thank you for that. When it comes to policy, I already mentioned that we did draft the policy 4 years before, but
But it
still,
does it talk about dignified toilets and all those requirements as well?
sorry?
Does it talk about the infrastructure needs of the school toilets for the girls?
Yes, of course, they are needed, but there are some
Okay.
wash in schools program going on right now, but not in all the schools. I think the schools need to have a special program, not only the schools, it should be Ministry of Water Supply that has to come up with some program for all the schools and colleges in Nepal, which is accepted internationally as dignified, menstruation hygiene friendly. So, and that has to be addressed by the policy as well. And there is a cost implication as well for that. So, a significant amount of cost is involved there. The government needs to allocate, and maybe some external donors would also be interested to just put their funds there. And when we talk about other dignified behaviors in the school, as already Ms. Pasang already said about the education processes, the syllabus itself needs to have this content, and there should be qualified men and women teachers, both, not only men. I don't emphasize either men or women, but I say both teachers should be there, and even the boys and girls should talk about it together, and that way only people will understand the importance of dignified menstruation in the school. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rajan sir. So, Jaideep, so as we talked about infrastructure and the choice of products and the freedom of choices, I know you would be working on the various schools in India and other part of the world in Africa as well. So having infrastructures, like how much, like this vending machines, and as Pasangji also mentioned about availability of the sanitary product in the school, how do you think is it practical to introduce this kind of product baskets in that young age, and especially through schools? Do you think it is practical? Is it possible to have this uh, kind of a change from the schools itself?
No, thank you for the questions. Actually, as said earlier, I think like one point I want to highlight before getting to that question is that like the disposal of menstrual products are very, very important. And before introducing
I
any,
was about to come to that later.
okay. So I think like if we before introducing, because connecting in the question only, before introducing any product, any solution to the market or to the consumers or users, we need to find like, so how do we, what is the life cycle? So it is the stock is all that. And so what is the life cycle of the product of the solution? If we, when we talk about, let's say, not talk about, let's say the sanitary pad itself, when you talk about disposable sanitary pad, which are plastic based or chemical based, so maybe the product is very cheap in terms of price. But the life cycle, when you talk about the dispose that sanitary pads, either you like incinerate it, or even you, if you are dumping it somewhere, which will take like 500 years to degrade, both the cases you incur a lot of cost. There is a data which says, meaning like from Pune municipality in India, that they incur about 4 to 5 rupees, which is in Indian rupees. I don't know how much it will be in terms of USD, per pad they are spending just to dispose it of. Whereas the product cost may be less than that, maybe 2 or 3 rupees, but they are spending 4 or 5 rupees just to dispose it of, either for incineration, transporting it there, or like let's say putting it in the dumping field. So I think that is very, very important. And as to now come back to your question directly, is that I think like we should share information, and as I said, in a scientific manner, unbiased manner, to the girls, definitely at the young age, but also give them like this thing, what is available in the vicinity, and what we can make available, whoever is working with that school, or to the is it maybe government, or maybe any social organizations, the what they can get like in that place. Because let's say, just give an example, we talk about menstrual cup, and then like if that menstrual cup is not available to them, or let's say if you they cannot afford it, there is also a meaning that like, although we should obviously talk about that, but then like also say that like this is this expensive, but then if you want it, like there is this cost is there, either someone is paying for it or not, we need to see. But then like what they can get like within their reach, within their in terms of, let's say, availability, in terms of the cost and all, also something which matters. Even if they cannot pay for this, like they can also make a cloth pad and stitch it inside in their home. That is very much a solution, and which we also encourage it. If they cannot afford a sanitary pad or other solutions, they can very well make a sanitary pad made out of cloth in their own home while stitching it there itself. So it's about their choice. It's about like what they want to try. But then like I would also say that like, if let's say you're talking to 100 girls in a school, and you talk about this bucket, and then maybe 10 says they want to try out menstrual cup, I would say that like if it is possible, if the funds are available, we should help them make that product available to them, and let them try it out and see what are their experience. And someone wants to try out, let's say, a cloth pack, someone wants to try a compostable pad, or whatever products they want to try. We should at least make them available for a trial basis and see. And after that, if the response is good, then one can also see about the availability and other things. But beyond that, what I talked about in the beginning is more important, is that whichever product, if it is, let's say in case of disposable products, then we should have the mechanism to like do the disposal part of it. It can be done in case of compostable bag. It can be composted in the school compound itself. We have done it with NDMC schools in Delhi and other places also. So it is possible. In case of menstrual cup, again, it is not required. Cloth pad is again fine. But then in case of plastic pads, incinerating it inside the school is very dangerous, because all the incinerators which are available in the market, leaving one or two which costs maybe in 30-40 lakh rupees, or maybe 5 or 6 lakh rupees. Below that, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 rupees incinerators are not scientific, and it is creating more pollution. In fact, the health of the school girls will get affected if you use that. Now, the last one you mentioned about the vending machine. Now, vending machine model, personally, I'm not a very big fan of that. Reason behind that, like once you install it, there is no one to take care of it after a point of time. So if you can ensure that maintenance, and then someone is also putting the pads every week or every those whatever frequency they need to be, and also maintain those coins, like if they're not free of cost, then it's okay. But then if you're not maintained, like it will fail miserably. So, and then also when you put a sanitary pad inside a vending machine, it costs more money because you need to put in a single wrapper for every pad. It costs 20-30 paisa just for putting that wrapper and add that cost for a pad. So you need to see the practicality of that. In NDMC in Delhi, so they are giving free of cost pads, but they have put in 3 pads together in one pack, and they're giving a plastic coin with that. So once you put a 1 plastic coin, they get this 3 pads back. And once they use the 3 pad, they will get another coin. So in a month, they get 3 plastic coins and get 9 pads, but they're not together because they might waste it or do other things. So they will get it once they use it, they will get one more. So that they get like 3 coins and total 9 pads in a month. So something like that could be more feasible than giving individual pads if there is no one to maintain that.
Yeah, thank you. Because accessibility is also one of the important part of the dignity, because you need to have those products accessible, be it any kind of product at time when they need it without all the hassles. And as we also talked briefly in the previous session, like how it is like even in the shops, you have to go and buy as if you are buying some illegal products. So accessibility is also part of the dignity when it comes to life cycles. Now moving on to from this adolescent age, because puberty is a part of our life and it's our part of our all the girls and the various genders life cycle. As we move on, I guess when we reach certain age, we are free to talk about, as Pasang mentioned, free to talk about with our partners, about with our friends, in our friend circles, about the various products. So which I guess will bring us to the level of kind of talking as we are talking about it. And then there is a phase where we are mother, when we give birth, and there is a post-pregnancy. Menstruation is one of the life-threatening to lots of women and girls, especially in the rural parts, and that is, I guess, one of the part which is very less handled about because of various things. So Pasangji, I know you work in the neonatal maternal health. How can you just put a light on how people deal with about the dignity and their assurance about required care post-pregnancy menstruations in the various parts of the world and how it is dealt?
I think post-pregnancy menstruation is different for individual women. Some of them have pregnancy like post-pregnancy menstruation within a month, whereas some of them have like in after 12 months of time. For example, myself, I had my post-menstruation after the pregnancy delivery was, I had like after a year, I had started having the normal periods. So it depends, depending on your physiological body and various other health related reasons. For example, I was giving an exclusive breastfeeding for my child. So I think that might be one of the reasons that I had late, like in about 12 months time. But I think that is something that we don't really discuss much, and it doesn't come in the lights as well, because we are only talking about like when we talk about menstruations, or even like we don't even use the term dignified menstruation at the moment, but it's a new term that we have been started using it. And as we heard from Helen that menopause things, they have started talking about menopause cafe, which is not very common in countries like Nepal or in various other parts of the countries. So I don't remember talking about post like delivery menstruations things as in like common terms. So it's a really relatively new term.
Yeah, that is something.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll come to Inge, because I know we talked about it a lot when we had our kids and so.
Sure.
So Inge, I will come back to you. And what do you think should be done for, because this is something that is not talked about much, and this is something that should be talked about, because that is also, you go through a lot of changes and you are lots of confusion. So can you just put a light on like this post-pregnancy menstruation and what should be talked?
Well, I mean, let me also share my own story on this topic. Like when I got my child, I think my menstruation set in like after 8 months, but then it was very infrequently. And I was not aware, like being really deep in this topic, I thought, okay, it's because I'm still breastfeeding. And it was only like half a year later that I went to see a practitioner, and I had some skin problems, and she was asking me about my menstruation, and I said, well, it's infrequent, but I thought it's normal. So even I, having been really dealing with this topic, was still unaware. So I think it's about a lot about education, awareness, and so on. And I think one thing which I personally was really inspired, and I'm grateful that I was going back to Austria. I loved living in Nepal, and I really appreciated all my time there. But I had the possibility over here to be cared by a midwife, a really proper midwife who was not from the medical education point of view looking at all these technical things, but she was simply seeing birth as a natural process. And at very many stages in time, this gave me like a person, a woman with a lot of experience, with thousands of kids, with saying this is all normal, this is the way it should be, rather than the technical medical thing which was just scaring you off with this could go wrong and that could go wrong. Don't get me wrong, I'm really happy for our medical system. It's really great to have them as a backup. But when it comes to the naturality of the process, what should be and how we are, this is just so complex. And I have a luck to have a practitioner who is on the one hand physical, so she's a physician, she is a trained MBBS, but she also has a spiritual aspect. And I talked to her a lot, and eventually it was also a mental thing for me to have my menstruation back again because of some challenges which I had in my life. So I think this is a very complex issue which requires the joint co-work of so many, of health workers, of midwives. And I really put the very strong emphasis on midwives here because they are like, societies had them for centuries, and I think they play a very central role. And just the last 50 years, they have been kind of been pushed aside from the medical field saying, well, we know this better. And I think a medical doctor, I really appreciate what they're doing, but then also give a space to proper midwives, which are really giving this emotional and this connected aspect.
Definitely engage. Because few on the comment box also, I see that role of the community nurses and creating awareness is very important. And when it comes, because once they start talking about it, once they, in Nepal it's called FCSB, from female community health workers, and talking about post-menstruation, post-pregnancy menstruation and how to deal with it is something that I guess is missing in our part of the world. And that is also very equally important to talk about when it comes to entire life cycle. It's not about the biological life cycle. What are the needs that they would require after, because the needs will be different than what is the need before the pregnancy. So as we move on to this biological life cycle with the need of our overall our changes of need, then we come to the phase around our late 40s, early 40s, when we come to menopause. So Helen, we come back to you. Menopause, talking about menopause is completely again one of the field that is not much talked about. What is the dignity when it comes to the menopause phase? What is dignity of for the woman when it comes to menopause phase?
First and foremost, it's simply talking about it. It's because it's shrouded in shame and secrecy. And one of the speakers in an earlier session mentioned Brené Brown's work. And shame thrives in secrecy. The only way we can help to break some of these taboos is by opening up the topic and having some of these difficult conversations. And I mean, if I look at the landscape as regards the UK, I mean, certainly over the last 5 years, there have been significant shifts in the narratives, particularly around menopause. And quite what the precise drivers are for that is really hard to pinpoint. My feeling is that I think we're having high-profile women in the media. They're coming forward and they're speaking about their experiences. And again, one of the speakers earlier today mentioned about the importance of narratives and personal narratives. I think there's great strength and importance in us telling our stories. And I mean, the likes of Michelle Obama recently and Oprah Winfrey have spoken about menopause. And I think that adds to the dignity aspect. Also, it's a generational thing. I think we're seeing young women being far more vociferous about issues that directly impact them. And whether that's body positivity, period dignity, and dignified menstruation. And I think social media has played a huge part in giving voice to those who would previously have had very little opportunity to be heard. And Nirvana Chowdhury said yesterday that without dignity, menstruation disempowers women. And I believe the same can be said of menopause, by ensuring that women can be seen and heard and reflecting those voices back with action and support, we can empower every member of society to grow and thrive.
Yeah. Definitely, and you rightly mentioned the role of media and social media. I remember here in the chat box, Jadip was mentioning how media plays a role in terms of dignity as well. So, Rajan sir, your take on, I would like to know your view on, like when we are talking about dignified menstruations and water and sanitation and all those things, are we also taking consideration of different life cycles of these women they go through, and also do we talk about do's and don'ts of media and what can be done? Do we have like in that particular policy you talk about, do we have anything to deal with the media? Is it mentioned, or do you think that should be there?
Well, I'm not not an expert on media, but I guess the media.
Do you think? Yeah.
So, yeah, please go ahead.
No, because this is something that we are going to talk about, is that how media plays a role. But when it comes to, since you have worked in the policy levels and in that distinguished level, has the role of media been talked about in that level?
Yes, of course, media must be there. Media has a role to play in every aspect of our life. And when you need to emphasize some issue, at that time, media has got some vital role. And media has to be brought in. And how do I put it? The media should be in the same pace with our advocates of dignified menstrual hygiene management. That way, I think the media can play a vital role. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not.
Jadip, I know you have just pointed out, Joy pointed out in the chat box as well, as you mentioned, the Padman has brought a new change in India when they talks about, and I also personally, I still remember where I worked for this private sector foundation where I work. The first time when we had a meeting with Mr. Muruganathan in the boardroom of the private sector, it was very awkward to see each and everyone's face, where we had Muruganathan and we had the big business persons in the table. When we were talking about sanitary napkin, they were kind of, where should we hide? Like, what are they talking about? Kind of like the facial expression they were. And definitely media had played a big role. Please add your view on that one when it comes to dignity of menstruators.
No, I think like media is very, very important. Without media, like the work would not get spread across, like within the community, within like the state or like the country or outside the country also. So they play a very key role. And now we are in a digital age. So like it plays a far bigger role now. But then I think like when we talk about media, I think about, I keep talking like when like I am being interviewed also, please show us like what you are writing after you have written that. So many times it happens like what we had actually said and they understood something else and they wrote something else. And then like, so what the final version comes into the media is completely different what we're trying to say. So that is one challenge with them. I think like if there are media people up there and today also, then maybe they will understand and appreciate also. I know they were always in a hurry to behind their times and all. But if they do this will be really helpful. And secondly is that many times I have seen also media not doing enough of research while they talk about certain topics, which can impact a lot to the audience, whoever is reading that. So and then like also when they are also talking about a solution and saying like this is the good product, this has got this and that and all. So that they should do some basic research about like when they're doing this. Because otherwise, like if they give a wrong information, then that becomes a norm in the market, and then that gets promoted also badly. And this is happening. Like I do not want to put that here in this topic because it is different, but just to mention that like just to take 1 minute, like the biodegradable and compostable are two different things. And then this word of biodegradable have been misused by media left, right and center. And it is, although it is a big reason behind that is the companies who are using wrongly, but then media is again promoting that without knowing then what it is, what is the right thing, information, what is the scientific information. So biodegradable means like anything which degrades naturally can be called as biodegradable, but this doesn't have any timeline. So it can happen in 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, 500 years. All of them can be technically, scientific terms can be called as biodegradable. Now this information is not to majority of the population in India and across the world, and also to the media also. Now because of that, like this thing, so by this definition, all plastics are biodegradable, all sanitary pads are biodegradable, but it will take 500 years to biodegrade. But unfortunately, so when you talk about like if you open Amazon in India, so you'll see like at least 100 or 200 companies are selling by the name of biodegradable organic pads, whereas all of them are plastic pads or oxodegradables. So this is like the challenge, and this has been again promoted in media. So that's why it is very important for media also to understand this. And so you talked about dignity. So it is again connected with that only, because once you give wrong information, then the right information is not getting there. And once you are not giving the right information, then it is like you are those people who are trying to provide wrong products or things. So they are using the media to promote their products, whereas and then media is the one which is maybe penalized, like people like us, we are penalizing media, but ultimately the reasons are those companies who are doing that. But then if they do a little bit of research on this can be avoided, and then things will be better, which is very important, like as along with the government. So governments are playing their roles many times, sometimes they go back, but now after 30 years, government of India has come up with the BIS standard for sanitary pads, and they also included compostable pad in that, and government of Nepal is following that, and I'm really happy to share that also. So that it took 30 years to come up with a new standard for sanitary pads for India. So, and then also for compostable pads there. So this is something like which government is doing, but then if until unless this has been again promoted by also the media's those things, information, so that will be very difficult. In case of Padman movie, you mentioned that, just will take another minute for this. So that movie had done a revolution in the market, which is really great in terms of the awareness building on menstrual hygiene across India and maybe many parts of the globe also, which is the very good part of it. But the bad part which has done by this movie is that so people on government started thinking then everyone can make pad in 2 rupees, everyone can set up a production unit by investing 2 lakh of rupees, everyone can become an expert in menstrual hygiene. So that is the wrong thing. And then every Tom, Dick and Harry now have become like and says that they are menstrual experts, and they are just going around and giving wrong information to the people, which is harming the society, harming the ecosystem, harming everything. So that is where again if media do not talk about such things which are being, and there are many who are just there for fame. I do not want to name, but then there are many who are just there for fame. They have no expertise and they do not want to do anything also, but they are just there for the fame and then using media to promote themselves there.
Actually, I think I got your very point that people are taking this as a good way to get into the fame and misusing the media in a lot extent. But at the same time, we see that because of the media and last few years, we see lots of people talking about menstruation. Now we need to talk about how to respect the dignity when it comes to the talking about menstruation as well. And Helen, again, I'll come back to you again. Like I know you have run your cafe, Menstrual Cafe, in a different part of the world, in Canada, in US, in Australia, and all. And also in some part of Africa. So how has that been different especially coming into the major city, especially I guess your outreach program on talking about menopause and all, different than talking in the urban areas? Like what has been your experience about talking about this menopause and dignity in rural areas, especially in Africa?
It's absolutely fascinating that the cafes have been far better received in some of the remote and rural areas compared to the very busy inner cities, which I think kind of bucks what you would expect, because you'd think perhaps somewhere like London, where you've got a high density population, you'd think that they would be well attended, whereas in reality very few women and men in fact actually go along to the inner city ones. The events that are held rurally and in quite remote locations are well attended, and I think that's because women and men look to within their communities for perhaps answers, solutions. They don't necessarily look to strangers. So it's from our point of view, it's been absolutely fascinating to see how they're received in different parts of the world, but also different parts of each individual country.
Yeah. So definitely, I think as we go towards the end of the session, as we have 7 more minutes, maybe let me just try to bring in what we have discussed, and maybe we'll discuss a bit more on few of the questions that has come. So we talked about dignity during the early stage in the adolescence puberty phase, and it is about that awareness to know, give that information that you need, and like to be able to take up this journey as a menstruator in this world, and next 40 years plus like that you will be menstruating. So that journey with the awareness, full knowledge, to having access to knowledge is one part of the dignity. So having an access to the right infrastructure, as the Rajan sir has very well summarized on each aspect, being having water facilities, having enough lighting, even having a proper lock and cleaning agents, all those kind of things as a part of dignity is something when it comes to you grow from this puberty phase. And as you move on to your teenage and you have a bucket of choices that Jaydeep talked about that you can choose upon, and with your accessibility, and you have a freedom of choice, and you need to know what are the pros and cons of each and part of the product. That is the dignity when you have a choice. It's like a freedom of getting what you want to choose and knowing with its merits and demerits. And also then as we move on, we talked about the post-pregnancy, a bit on the post-pregnancy menstruation, which is again a least talked about topic, and having a proper facilities to talk about a help group, self-help group or midwife, or the facilities to talk about a post-pregnancy menstruation is something which we see still lagging. And of course, and then we talked about menopause as well, and which Helen has they have been a flag bearer so far on talking about it, and where lots of the world is still kind of have to learn a lot about menopause. And we see lots of comment here in the comment box as well. People wants to have those kind of cafes in their places in rural part of India, and as Archana mentioned, it would be great to have it in India and other part of the world where people start talking about menopause, which I see even I am not much aware about what are the things that happens in menopause. And of course, we talked about the media and the outreach program. Of course, outreach is something which will set the floor for the dignity. As we talked about the various media aspect that has brought the menstruation as a talking topic at various meeting hall and as well as various event, but again, talking about the dignity and talking about the access to various things is something that is need to be taught and discussed about. So, and there is a few questions I'm talking about, and which we thought that we have dealt about regarding the dignity in the disposal, which we have briefly talked upon, which Jaydeep has talked upon. But yeah, disposal has been one of the major issue when it comes to dignity of the menstruators. Like I remember even while going to our schools, we used to like wrap it in a paper and bring it back home, because in schools you don't have dustbins to throw it properly. And so having a proper infrastructure of the disposal, as Jaydeep mentioned, it's not advisable to having an incinerator in the schools and all. So having a proper disposal facility is something that is also part of the dignity of every menstruators, because even in the offices or the schools, disposal is something. So lastly, but I would like to request Rajan sir, if you would like to give a takeaway of this panel discussion, what could be a policy intervention and what would be your word, a concluding word for this overall menstrual dignity throughout life cycle, and what would be your conclusion of this panel discussion and takeaway for most of our listeners? Rajan sir.
Well, thank you for that. Well, I have noted down around 6-7 points for overall whatever we discussed here, and then what should be the way out for Nepal or even South Asia. First and foremost issue is about the awareness among the elderlies of the society. The young population is almost aware, but the elderlies are not. So they need to be brought in the same pace as others. This is the first issue for the change of behavior of the community towards the menstruators. The second one, I think, is the girls and women should not be separated from the family during those 4 or 5 days of menstrual cycle. They should not be separated. Third one, the men, especially the school and college boys at public places, and fathers and brothers at each home can play a vital role in eradicating this menstrual untouchability and this taboo, the stigma. The fourth one I would like to say is the society needs to be prepared to adjust with the menstruators before dismantling the menstrual huts, especially constructed in the western parts of Nepal. So without preparing the society, there are some law enforcing agencies that are dismantling the menstrual huts in the western Nepal, and that is creating a lot of problem. Not a positive one, it is not giving solution, but it is further creating problems. So the society should be prepared before dismantling the huts. Fourth one is we need some amendment in the law. For the offenders, there is just a very small amount of punishment, like 3 months of jail and hardly $25 of fine. And I don't think this is enough for the perpetrators. Another issue is the sufficient numbers and better design and construction of public toilets to ensure dignity and MHM friendliness is another issue that has to be tackled. Like when you talk about the numbers of toilets for the females, I think many of you must have heard about spare standard. During emergency, we provision around 3 toilets for the female and 1 for the male. So that ratio, I think, should be maintained in our public places also. And another very important issue for our Hindu society is the Hindu sages, priests and pandits and the traditional healers can also be mobilized in creating awareness, because our society is a bit very superstitious kind of society. So these people have to play a big role in bringing the people to aware society. And there is another issue of like better disposal facility we talked about, and mostly the biodegradable pads are there in the market nowadays. So let us see what impact does it have. Is it really biodegradable or not? That we have to see. And there is another issue of disposal by incinerators, and most of the incinerators all around our country and mostly in South Asia are not functioning well. There is just one problem. The problem is they do not provide sufficient space to suck the air inside the incinerator. So if they can do it, then that will be a better design, and then I see a good future for dignified menstrual hygiene management for Nepal and South Asia as well. Thank you very much.
you, Razanji, for that very optimistic word and also those very informative point. I'm sure that will be part of this docket that will come out of this international workshop that has been. And thank you for your time. And I would request if any of the panelists would have their few words to add on, if then please go ahead and put your points. Do you? Okay, I think our panelists are also. Helen, do you want to add on something?
Yeah, I would actually. Very, very briefly, I'd like to just make a comment. It was something that Barna Rata from CEDAW said yesterday about the fact that her dignity had been trampled at the age of 11 when she started her periods. And I just wanted to say that shocked me and upset me to some extent, or to a great extent, because no woman or girl or indeed man should have their dignity trampled over. And I think dignity is very often not about grand gestures or expensive media campaigns. It's about nurturing it within our homes and within our workplaces. And I think we need to resist the urge to remain silent. We also need to resist the urge to shout, because many of the most successful movements are driven by a groundswell of calm, persistent voices, which altogether can produce lasting and meaningful change. And I think by all of us coming together for this workshop, we're sending an incredibly powerful and compassionate message to the world, that there is no shame in talking about menstruation or indeed menopause, and the fact that we must talk about menopause and we must talk about menstruation. And because, as Laxman Belbey said earlier, we must push back the pushback.
Thank you, Helen, for such an encouraging work. Thank you so much, and thank you all the panelists for your wonderful time, and thank you all the participants for listening out. And I hope when we are here next year, we'll have more success story to talk about. And have a good day, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.